So one of our team riders needs his boards waxed, and he likes the way I wax them. So I guess we'll show you the proper way to wax a snowboard. The first step in waxing a snowboard is cleaning the base. We use a citric acid solution. Many surf shops carry it. It's called Chief Firewater. It works extremely well to clean a base of a snowboard. It's non-toxic and biodegradable. And then we go over it with a Scotch-Brite pad. So first we're going to spray down the base. Get our handy dandy sprayer here pumping. Get it thoroughly wet. Try not to make too much of a mess, but our main interest is the snowboard, getting it clean. This process removes all the old wax, any diesel that's on it from the snowcats grooming the snow, any kind of impurities, sap, anything. It works extremely well. So we go through this and we do this until we're confident it's clean. And I can see on this base that this stuff is working really well. Some boards are harder to clean than others, and this board's a newer board, so it's cleaning up really well. And it wasn't that dirty to begin with, but there were some noticeable stains on it. But our main thing here is not to make this board pretty, it's to make the wax hold after we put it on, because if you put new wax on a base that's dirty, that wax is not going to adhere. So I'm pretty satisfied that this is a pretty clean board. So I put down my Scotch-Brite pad. I just pick up some paper towels, fold it up. Again, the beauty of this citric acid is it's non-toxic and biodegradable. Back in the olden days when, well, I was never young, but back in the olden days, we used to have to use some pretty gnarly carcinogen-based, non-lethal but could be lethal solutions that were crazy. I can't even believe it. You see how dirty that was? That was the dirt that came off of this snowboard, and it didn't even look dirty. But that residue you're seeing on the towel is what would help to inhibit the quality wax job that we're about to do. So I'll continue drying this off. The next step we're going to do is use our heat gun. It gets the board nice and dry, but more importantly it heats it up, so the wax that we put in just gets sucked right into the base. On any of these boards with a cindered base, and most of the modern, especially the high performance boards, have a cindered base of one degree or another, it's really important to open the pores up before you wax it, because it helps the wax to really get in deep, and you have like a little mini wax fuel tank when you're riding. So we're going to go ahead and heat this base up. At home, if you're doing this, you could always use a blow dryer. This gun gets really hot, so we have to be careful that we don't hold it in one area too long. So now I have this board nice and warm. So the next step is we're going to apply some wax. Okay, so now we're ready to wax. So we have our iron, which is preheated right now. When you heat the iron up, you don't want it to be smoking, because if it's smoking, first of all, it's too hot and may damage your board, but also it will damage the properties of high quality wax we're about to put on. Some of these are fluorinated, some of them are warm, some of them are for really icy conditions, and all these things are formulated in these bars. So now what we're going to do with our preheated iron is we're going to go ahead and wax the board. So we usually stick the stick right up to the iron, and you can do this at home too. Just remember, it just gets really messy, and you don't want to mess up your house, and whatever iron you use is going to be destroyed for life, so you got to get a dedicated iron. So we're just going to go ahead and put this wax on. It doesn't take a lot, but you're more than welcome to use as much as you want if you're doing it at home. But just keep in mind that the more you put on, the harder it's going to be to scrape. That's how much wax I'm putting on. Now, set that down and start going over the board. I like to do it a section at a time to make sure that I got all the wax in. Every tech is different. I like to concentrate on one area, because I know my iron isn't super hot because it's not smoking, but I can see the areas that I'm getting, and I can go back over them. I like to go this way and this way. The final passes are always horizontally, but I like to make sure that I'm getting this wax in everything. And like I said, it doesn't take a lot of wax, and on a good snowboard that's nice and flat like this one, you won't have a lot of impurities in the base. Another thing, this board here doesn't have bindings on it, but if you wax your board when it has bindings on it, you'll get little divots where the screw inserts are. Don't worry about those. Just get them waxed in there. You don't have to fill them up or anything because you're certainly not going to feel out on the snow. But you should get a little bit of wax in there. And don't get freaked out because you think there's something wrong with your base or anything. That's just normal. Whenever you mount a binding on a board, the inserts have a tendency to suck the base up. If you are ironing your board and waxing your board and you see anything poking through the base, that's a whole nother story. You got problems. One of your screws is too long and is actually going through the insert into the base. But you can learn a lot about your board when you're waxing it too, because a board is supposed to, most boards are supposed to be relatively flat. So I can feel like when I'm waxing this board is certainly not edge high. It's a real good shaped board for what it is. Some of the new boards out today though, they do have scoops in the nose or will have weird funky things on the side rails. So don't be alarmed if you see a consistent, what you might think is a flaw in your base, because that's the way the board was made. So as we're going over this, I'm just making sure that I got every area. And I go all the way from tip to tail, and a lot of techs don't. They'll just go from here to here instead of all the way to the edge. I just like to do the whole thing because it looks a lot better, and if a customer is paying to have their snowboard done, you know, they should have the best tuned snowboard, not only functionally but also aesthetically. Because whenever you put wax, especially on a center base, it brightens it up nicely, and if you use the right wax for the right conditions, it's going to fly. First thing I want to show you is the type of scrapers we use. We use plexiglass scrapers, and everybody has their own favorite scraper. I have a tendency to really like this Burton Tri scraper. I don't know why. I've tried other ones, and this is the one I like the best. I go through about 4 or 5 of them a year by filing them down, and sometimes they break, but works good. But we tune a lot of snowboards. If you notice, there's a little notched area right in here. That notched area is to get the wax off of your edges, and it's really important that you do that too. Before we get started, I'm going to show you how we sharpen our wax scraper. We sharpen it much in the same way that we sharpen the metal scraper, but we use a different file. This is the Panzer file we have mounted on our bench that we use to sharpen wax scrapers. And the way you do it is we just put it on here like this, and we gently move it back and forth on the Panzer file. We turn it around. We're not doing the notched area because we don't want to screw up that notch. We do one of the flat areas. And as you can see, there's a lot of material coming off of this wax scraper, and that's good. But a good sharp wax scraper will make it a lot easier for when it comes time to scrape the wax off. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes, and as I go up and down the snowboard here, I feel the base, and it's cool. You never want to scrape a snowboard when the wax is warm because you'll take off a lot of the wax. So we're going to start with the notched edge of our scraper. So we run this edge of the scraper down the edge of the snowboard in order to get all the wax off. And as you can see, there was wax on the edge of the snowboard. And that's not that big of a deal. The only thing is, you got to remember, if you're in icy conditions or any hard pack condition, you don't want this wax on the edge of your snowboard because it's going to inhibit the bite of your edge into that gnarly ice or hard pack conditions that you encounter. So we do that to both areas. Turn it around this way, and we do the same thing on this side. And you can see the wax coming off as I do this. This is always the first step that I do when I take the wax off of the snowboard. And sometimes you got to angle the scraper a little bit in order to get different areas. Okay, now we got most of the wax off the edges, so we're going to start scraping. A lot of people are under the impression you don't scrape it too much. You want to leave a little bit of wax on. Nothing could be further from the truth unless you're doing a storage for a summer storage for a snowboard. A lot of times you leave the wax on to protect the base and the edges. But when you're ready to ride, you got to scrape every bit of this wax off. And there's there's no reason to leave anything on. Remember, we warmed at this base. This wax is soaked into the pores, and you're not going to be scraping off that wax. So we're going to start like this. I usually start at the tip and the tail. That a lot of people don't wax because there's just more work to do. But again, I like it because it makes the snowboard look good and the customers are happy. And if you notice, I'm not pushing the scraper, I'm pulling the scraper. And every tech has their own technique, and I got my own, and all I have to say is this is not the right technique. You'll actually lift the wax off the board in many cases. So you want to actually pull like this. You want to scrape it. You don't want to gouge it off. So I'll do the tip, and I'll do the same thing at the tail. Now that I have that done, I'm just going to brush it off a little bit so I can see where I'm at. We have a little catch box here. You just brush the wax right into. We never reuse the wax either. A lot of people think we reuse it, but no, we never reuse the wax in this catch box because it's contaminated. So, take my nice sharp edge of my scraper, and now I really start getting into it. You can see I'm pulling all the way down. It's not that hard. Now if you put more wax on your board or use a colder weather wax, it is going to be harder, and you really got to get into it. Because remember, you want to get every bit of this wax off of this snowboard. And in those little areas, again, this board doesn't have bindings on it. In those little areas, if it did have bindings on it, if the base is getting sucked in, you got to get the wax out of there too. Because it'll make for a smoother glide on the snow. So bear with me while I get all this wax off of this board. Takes a little while, but you got to do a good job. Any wax that you inadvertently leave on is a potential slow spot on your base. Now go back over it again. I can see little areas that I didn't get the wax, so I will scrape a little bit like this, and I'll take it back over like this. And I just keep going and going and going. Got to get all this wax off. You cannot take off too much wax if you're doing it like this. And I can feel the base, as I get this wax off, gliding faster and faster with my scraper. And that's what you want. So now what we're going to do, the last and final step in waxing the snowboard, is we're going to buff the base out. At home, if you're using it, you can get some kind of horsehair brush like we have here, or lightly with a Scotch-Brite pad, but lightly. But what we use this power-mounted apparatus on a drill. Final step that I do after I've used the apparatus on the drill, I go over with the horsehair brush, and I just got to do it lightly, and I get down and I see, if any, and it doesn't look like it, any residue wax that maybe that big rolling buffer didn't get. And this base looks pretty good. Then I'll take my fingernail or whatever and just run it across the edge to make sure I got all the wax off. And this board looks good. It's good to go.